All right. Well, good morning, guys. So it's my privilege to um, be with you again. It's been a while since I've been on the Tuesday morning call. For those of you that don't know, I've been part of the Regroup program for over 5 years now, and I lead the Thursday morning or Thursday evening group out of my church at Central Heights, um, but in affiliation with the Doing Family Right program. So excited to be here. And so this couple weeks ago, I was listening to the Porn Free Radio podcast hosted by Matt Dobschutz, and I know we've probably talked about it a lot in my group on Thursdays, and you guys have probably talked about it. Some of you guys may have even heard the podcast that I'm going to be kind of talking about. But what he was talking about was being an owner versus being a victim. And so we're going to get into that today. I thought it was some good information and thought I would want to share it with you guys. So this morning we're going to talk about two types of people in the world, owners and victims. Victims see themselves as victims of their situation or circumstance. Life happens to them. Owners, on the other hand, while they can't control every situation and circumstance, they control their reaction to any situation. And so learning the habits and thinking like an owner is essential to our recovery journey. So taking an ownership mindset is fundamental to recovery. Recovery is taking 100% ownership of your needs. This does not mean meeting all of your needs personally. We don't recover by ourselves. Remember, the opposite of addiction is connection. When we realize we need something, it is our responsibility to figure out how that need gets met. Do I need accountability? Do I need to tighten my boundaries? Do I need to commit to a group or seek one-on-one counseling? These are not items we take care of on our own, but it is our responsibility to seek them out. If we don't own this responsibility, chances are very high that we will stay stuck in our addiction. Steve Chandler is an author who works with professionals in a variety of areas on how to improve their success. He teaches people how to mind shift through books and speaking engagements. And the following is taken from a talk he did about the owner victim choice. He says, everywhere you go, whether you're sitting in a business meeting, whether you're sitting with your friends or family, or whether you are interviewing people to hire them, you will notice two different kinds of people. Number one, there is an owner. This is a person who has created a way of thinking, someone who owns their own spirit, their own energy, and someone who owns their own response to any situation. If I am an owner, I take complete ownership. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "No one can make me feel inferior without my permission." What she really meant was she was taking ownership. No one else would have the power over her in that area. If you could open up the hardware, software, or the internal biocomputer of an owner, here's the programming you would see. I take full responsibility for happiness in my life. That's an owner. Another kind of person is a victim. Rather than taking ownership of their response to every situation, what a victim does out of habit, and yes, it's only a habit, the victim is a victim of the situation, a victim of circumstance, a victim of other people. So how do we know who's who? Well, you can tell 100 different ways, but I believe the best way to tell who you have in front of you is by listening to language. They use a different kind of language. Inside the head of the owner, thoughts are different, and we can tell the thoughts are different because the language is different. The first thing to listen for is how a person talks about life. The owner will say, I use life. They will talk about life as an energy source, a gift, something I have. So I'm going to use it. They would say, I woke up this morning, I had it again, so I'm going to use it again. The victim thinks differently, and you will hear them speaking differently. They think life uses me. So you'll hear nothing but negative things about life. Life is unfair. Life is a burden. Life is a curse. And victims will talk about that all the time. The owner will go through life situations asking what he can get from them, what lesson he can learn, what is the takeaway, how can he grow. The victim will go through life situations and figure out how he can get through them. Life is a struggle, trying to get through it. Work is tough right now, just trying to get through it, and so on. So that's a quote from Steve Chandler in his victim owner choice So the owner owns his response to any situation or circumstance and stays in control of his response. He is not reactive. He is choosing his response. The victim, on the other hand, goes with whatever happens, just reacting to the emotions of the moment. As addicts, when we are stuck in our behaviors, we go through life reacting to triggers around us. Most of us have heard the acronym HALTS, HALTS. That stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and stressed. When these situations come up, we tend to react in the habit we have chosen, pornography or sexually acting out. And these behaviors will continue to happen as long as we are in the victim mentality. We are letting the situation dictate or choose what our reaction will be. We are not taking ownership of our circumstances. Victim language is riddled with shoulds. I should really do this. I should get on that. I should get my recovery work done. I should make more phone calls. Victims will also make a boatload of excuses as to why they can't do something. I can't come to group every week because of my work schedule. Well, we have 4 time and day slots available now, so stop making excuses. I can't put blocking software on my devices because it slows them down. I can't do all this work. I don't have the time. We've heard them all. Victims will often blame others, the challenges they will face. They often feel entitled, like they're owed something. And when life does not deliver that something, they will let the disappointment choose their actions and their behaviors. Negative self-talk and comparisons can also be evidence of the victim mentality. We have believed the lies that we are unworthy, unlovable, unforgivable, and that we will never measure up to so-and-so, that we cower in our victimhood and refuse to allow ourselves to think differently. Olivia talked about this last week. The victim mentality is one of the hurdles to choosing freedom. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, which is victim mentality, but of power and love and self-control. When we wallow in self-pity, resentment, and blaming, we are living in fear, not allowing God's power to transform us into owners who make changes. Remember, boys make excuses, men make changes. Dr. Dave did a talk with that same title. In it, he covers 2 distinct routes to recovery failure, where addicts are either stuck in blaming others or blaming themselves. This type of victim mentality will rob you of the ability to take ownership and make real change. Just a few examples of this from that talk. Owners will take responsibility as opposed to shifting responsibility or complete irresponsibility. Owners will own their problem as opposed to accusing others or playing the victim. Owners will give full effort to effect change, whereas the victim will deny the need for any effort at all. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. Remember, boys make excuses, men make changes. So another part of owner language is I want this. And this is not a selfish want. This is something I want to go after, something I find important. I will do whatever it takes to make the changes to ensure I don't repeat the same mistakes over and over. So let's talk about football for a minute. If you thought about an owner in football, which leadership positions would usually come to mind? Probably a coach or a quarterback. Well, Patrick Mahomes would be a good example of an owner. This season, he was probably surrounded by the most inept group of wide receivers he has ever had on an NFL football field. Other than his tight end, Travis Kelce, he did not have one elite level pass catcher on his team. So numerous times this year, his receivers would drop an easy pass, run the wrong route, causing an incompletion or worse, an interception, or line up offside, causing the play to be blown dead. Never once did I hear from the podium after a game, man, MVS ran an out when he should have run a slant. I threw it where he was supposed to be and it got picked. He would always say, I got to be better out there. I need to make sure I'm on the same page as my receivers. I need to make sure the play call is clear. I need to spend more time watching film so I can pick up the defensive reads better. He always took responsibility for the outcome on the field when it came to his performance and the teammates around him, not wanting to make himself look better by deflecting responsibility to the mistakes of others. Ownership language is intentional. It's accountable, accepting of the situation. Knowing that we have prepared for situations that come up, we are empowered to our own reaction and handle it. But please know we are not expected to draw only upon our own power for this change in mindset, to move from victim to owner. God gave us the Holy Spirit for a reason. 2 Corinthians 3, verse 17. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. God also promises that when we trust in Jesus, we will have victory. 1 John 5, verse 4 and 5. For every child of God defeats this evil world, and we achieve this victory through our faith. And who can win this battle against the world? Only those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So how do we identify when we are in a victim mindset? So let's think about a time when we are emotionally distraught, upset about something that happened at work, a fight we had with our spouse or another family member, frustrated, angry, or anxious about a situation. These are the times to examine whether there is any victim language taking place. Why did my boss treat me that way? I wish I was better at this. Why does this always happen to me? I'll never be able to figure this out. Look for these types of thoughts. After a relapse would be a good time to examine, were there any victim stories that I was believing? Was I feeling self-pity? Was I giving into passive behaviors? If we have identified any of these mindsets, then we are acting like a victim. Well, what do we do when we've identified those? Obviously, we don't want to stay a victim forever. How do we shift out of victimhood into taking ownership? So there's a tool for challenging and changing our victim thinking. So if you Google Byron Katie, you will find this about her. In 1986, at the bottom of a 10-year spiral into depression and self-loathing, Byron Katie woke up one morning in a state of joy. She realized that when she believed her stressful thoughts, she suffered, but that when she questioned them, she didn't suffer, and that this is true for every human being. Her simple yet powerful process of self-inquiry, which she calls the work, consists of 4 questions and a turnaround, which is the way of experiencing the opposite of what you believe. So she has developed 4-question tool that Matt shared with us in this podcast. So the questions: first, is it true? And the answer would be yes or no. Second question, can we absolutely know that it's true? Again, a yes or no. Third question, how do you react and what happens when you believe that thought? And fourth question, who or what would you be without the thought? So the answers to these questions could be different for every one of us. Sometimes these answers will be determined by past challenges or situations we have found ourselves in, or the inner dark voice that we are listening to. But let's walk through this in a general sense. So using the 4 questions, let's investigate the statement, my wife is rejecting me sexually. Is it true? Is it true that she is rejecting you? The reactionary thought would most likely be yes. Are you frustrated when she rejects you? Yes. Can you absolutely know that it's true? Well, ultimately, can you really be for certain that she was rejecting you? Maybe she is not really feeling well. Maybe you started the discussion too late in the evening. Maybe you haven't pursued a connection with her outside of the bedroom. These questions help to clarify what we can be sure of. Third question, how do you react and what happens when you believe that thought? What happens when you believe my wife is rejecting me? Do you experience anger, stress, or frustration? How do you treat her? Do you give her the look? Do you try to change her in any way? How do these reactions feel? How do you treat yourself? Does this thought bring stress or peace into your life? We talked about HALTs earlier: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed. When we believe thoughts like this, do we use porn as an escape to self-soothe? Or if we react like victims, we will typically move in this direction. Question 4, who or what would you be without the thought? Close your eyes, picture yourself in the presence of your wife in this situation. Now imagine and looking at her just for a moment without the thought, my wife is rejecting me. What do you see? What would your life look like without that thought? What would we be doing if we didn't have this thought, without the disappointment of my wife is rejecting me? We have the opportunity to take ownership of a situation and accept responsibility for how we are perceived. So the turnarounds. A statement can be turned around to the self, to the other, or to the opposite. Victims often think whatever thought they are having is true. Not only is it true, but it's the only option. This turnaround exercise can open us up to other possibilities. So let's turn around the statement we just talked about. My wife is rejecting me. So the first turnaround for that would be, I am rejecting me. I am telling myself a story that I'm rejected. She just said, no, this isn't a good night. But I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough, that I'm abandoned and she's letting me down. How about this one? I'm rejecting my wife. I'm actually pulling away from her because I didn't get the response I wanted. You weren't willing to have sex with me now, so I'm pulling away and rejecting you. The last one, my wife should reject me. Maybe you waited until too late. Maybe you haven't been intentional. Maybe you weren't kind to her earlier, or in the context of things you did earlier in the day, got you the result that you didn't want in the evening. We think back to the quarterback we were talking about earlier. He didn't get the result he wanted when the receiver ran the wrong route. What do I need to do differently in order to get into a position to succeed? If tomorrow I want to have intimacy with my wife, what do I need to do during the day to set that up? We've talked a lot about intimacy anorexia in this group. And am I doing what is required to build connection with my wife, or am I withholding from her? These are all ideas as to why my wife should reject me. Another example of a turnaround. So imagine you're at the park and you see a woman jogging. It's summer, so she's not wearing much, and what she is wearing is very form-fitting and attractive. She comes into your point of view, and your first thought is, wow, she's triggering me. Instead of bouncing your eyes, you might think about taking a second look or storing the memory in your brain for personal use later. The belief is, she's triggering me. If you let that go, it leads to a reaction. I'm helpless to withstand this, so I'm off to the races. She's triggering me. The first turnaround is that a statement can be turned around to the self. So now it's, I'm triggering me. I'm letting this anonymous person start to take over my thoughts. I am engaging this. We can also turn it to self to say, I'm looking for a trigger. We try to put ourselves in position to be triggered. We go online and hope that something will pop up that will accidentally click on something to catch a glimpse. Second turnaround is to the other. I've made her my trigger. She's not triggering me. I've done something to her. This shifts the responsibility off of her and places it on me. I can choose how things trigger me. The third turnaround is to turn to the opposite. Seeing her today is helping remind me of my recovery. She's not a trigger. Her presence is bringing to mind my recovery and the journey that I am on. We cannot go through life playing the victim every time an attractive woman crosses our path. We need to figure out how to experience these situations and then choose our reaction to them. This comes down to self-discipline and commitment. Job 31, verse 1. I have made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Our last turnaround example, and this will be very pertinent to all of us in this journey. My accountability partner should check on me. So that's the statement, that's the belief. He should ask better questions. He should call and follow up with me more. Notice the shoulds there. This is typical victim language, putting the responsibility on someone else rather than taking ownership. Try this. I need to check on me. What am I doing to check in with myself, to assess where I'm at? Am I following through on my 5 C's? Next, my accountability partner should not check on me. So that's the other turnaround. I need to check in with my accountability partner. I need to initiate. If I found something in my own assessment, is there something on my Covenant Eyes report that I know he will question? Do I wait for him to call me, or do I reach out, own my behavior, and present a plan to change and make sure to avoid these reports moving forward? Victims will blame relapses on other factors. I saw something and was triggered, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. My wife is away. I found a device that didn't have Covenant Eyes on it, so I relapsed. I was traveling, and there were movie channels on the hotel TV. I couldn't avoid it, and it was too late to reach out to my accountability partner or my group. Or today was a crappy day at work. My boss yelled at me, and the customers were rude to me. I needed something to help me feel better. We've all heard or have told stories like this. When will we stop living like a victim? Owners will learn from each of these experiences, even putting preemptive plans together to avoid these situations altogether. We don't have to do this alone. An owner will take advantage of the community around him, leaning on God and his brothers to get in front of triggering scenarios. Victims will retreat, isolate, live in solitude, and the belief that they are stuck and there is nothing they can do to overcome. God is calling us to be overcomers. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 again. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. So guys, let's do what it takes to throw off the victim mindset and become owners. Let's talk about it.